What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. I am your host for today, Simon Villanoz, aka Coach V. It's been a minute, but I'm back here with some season previews, which does remind me, we've had season previews going on for the last couple weeks now. Cody just finished all of his. He should be in Europe by now. And then I believe Gideon's episode, which was a pretty big one, about 15-ish, 16-ish teams. That one dropped just before this. I want to say that's episode 280. So make sure you check those out here. But on this episode, we're going to talk about some teams here in Colorado Springs here. Mostly 5A and 4A teams. I'm going to have to do another episode about more Colorado Springs teams here. Obviously, I think there's 2 or 3 more of those at least coming up. So be on the lookout for those. But here on this episode, we're going to preview these teams. We're going to talk about last year, talk about players they're losing, whether it's by transfer, graduation, departure, whatever. Then we'll talk about key players, and then we're going to predict the record. We're going to predict the record and give them a window of wins, aka wow, that they will go through, or that we predict them. I predict them to be within this next upcoming season here. So there you go there. I am going to also put this out there. Look, I can't talk about every single player. There's just no way, especially on some of these really talented teams. It gets really hard to talk about every single player. So if I don't mention a player, I apologize. I probably know who you are, to be honest with you, because I've seen your name down here on paper or something like that, for sure. Or I've seen you play, already. And so it's nothing personal, but do got a lot of teams to go through. Got 10 teams on this episode here. Pretty much every episode will have about 10 teams here, so a pretty solid amount here, a pretty solid amount to work with. And this is something that we started doing last year, and so kind of as a preview to this season preview here, I'm gonna go ahead and talk real quick in general broad strokes about how accurate I was when it came to predicting records and whatnot. So let's get into it. So out of the 10 teams that I'm going to cover on this episode, 2 of them I predicted the record exactly right. Now I'm not going to say what teams I predicted exactly right or was wrong about. You have to listen to the episode to do that. But 2 out of the 10 teams I predicted exactly right. All right. And then 3 out of the 10 teams, not including obviously the ones I predicted exactly right, were within the window of wins. So I didn't predict the record correctly, but I was right about how many wins they would get. So there you go. That's 5 out of the 10 teams so far, which I'll take. That's a pretty positive. Those are pretty good prediction numbers right there. So there you go. And then this one's a little niche. I was kind of surprised by how many teams there were that fit within this, but 3 out of the 10 teams I'll talk about in this episode were not within the window of wins that I predicted for them, but they were within 1 game of that range. So if I predicted them to win between 7 and 10 games, maybe they won 6 games, right? Or maybe if I predicted them to be between 6 and 8 games, maybe they won 9 games. So not too far off. I still got the gist right there. All right, so there you go there. At that point, that is 8 out of 10 teams that I was at least relatively close with my predictions. And then 2 out of the 10 teams I talked about or will talk about in this episode, I just got the records wrong and I was just off the mark. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this episode here after that little quick preview, which I'm going to do for every episode, at least of mine. And then I'll probably drop a graphic afterwards. So yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and start by talking about one of the best programs in Colorado Springs. That is the 5A Pine Creek Eagles. Last year was their first year in 5A, and they did pretty well here. They actually fell within the window of wins, at least for the regular season here. Originally last year, I had them predicted to go 9-1. Instead, they went 8-2, so not too far off there. And overall, they went 10-3, making a pretty deep run here. Beating Legacy 30-24 in the first round, defeating Grandview away, by the way, by by a lot, 24-3. They didn't have Liam Zarka, but still, I thought that was a game they still could have won, which they did. And then they went on and played Cherry Creek, the defending state champions, eventual state champions from last year, actually. And they only lost to them 41-21 here. So a good first year for Pine Creek here in 5A, as they continue to build on that moving forward. But this was obviously not without some, slight concerns. I think there were some key losses here. Some losses that I felt like they definitely could have won. The Valor Christian game, that was a game that I predicted them winning. They lost 24-7. It was much closer than that in the fourth quarter. Valor would score like 10 more points or something like that, I would say. And so I think that's a winnable game. They just couldn't get it done at the end of the day. And then the Regis Jesuit game, that was probably one of the worst games I've ever seen a Pine Creek team play here. Not like overall, I would say mostly the blame goes on offense. Defense, I thought they made plenty of plays here. Offense just couldn't deliver, and so that was real uncharacteristic. And then I would say the Cherry Creek loss was a key one there. I think that could have been winnable, but that is a tough squad, so I won't hold that against them. But they did get key wins as well. Grandview was big, Legend was big, Las Vegas, who they went to Nevada to play, they blew them out. That was obviously huge, so that was pretty big time there. Now, they do return a lot, but before we talk about those players, let's go ahead and talk about some of the graduating seniors, some of the players that they are losing. So they are losing Jake Graver. He was actually their lead receiver here. At least I want to say in yards, he was their lead receiver here. He had 35 receptions. I guess he was the lead receiver all around. But 35 receptions, 562 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So that is pretty big time by him. They're also losing their second lead receiver in Jerry Lydiot, who had 18 receptions for 206 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I might as well throw this in there as well since we're talking about receivers. But they are also losing their third receiver here, Elijah Roy, who it was a sophomore last year but will be transferring to Vista Ridge there. And on the season, he got 12 receptions, 180 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So there you go. Right off the bat, your 3 leading receivers gone. So that's going to be a little tough for Pine Creek here. But let's go to the defensive side of the ball, where, they had Brett Alvey, who was a big-time player for us here. I mean, he was a top 5 senior linebacker that we named. Just super versatile, did it all on the season here. He was the lead tackler and sack leader with 119 tackles, 29 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. They're also losing their second leading tackler in Logan Matthews, who had 63. And then coming back to the offensive side of the ball here, they are losing, I want to say, 1 lineman. Yeah, I think it's just one, in Tanner Regis, who was another top 5 senior player for us last year. He made our list there. And, he played all across the line, including center. And so it's kind of tough to be losing the communicator of your line and, one of the leaders of your squad in general. So that is definitely a tough loss there. Altogether, looking at their losses, I mean, they're losing 4 of their top 13 tacklers. Not a lot, not a lot. Definitely a little top heavy, though, with Alvey and Matthews being your leading tacklers. Jerry Lydiot also is in that mix. He had 42 tackles as well as 2 sacks there. So, you're losing those guys. That's obviously tough, but you're returning the majority of, I would say, your defense, more so than your offense. On offense, you are definitely losing some pretty key players there, at least in the receiving core. But here's the thing about Pine Creek. They run the football. That was their identity last year. They were going to run the football and play good defense, and that is what they did here. Let's talk about their defensive players first here. Ramon Pacheco, 33 tackles, 7 INTs, 7 pass deflections. Justice Nicholson, 55 tackles, 7 interceptions, 4 pass deflections there. I mean, I'm just going to talk about those 2 right now, but you obviously have other guys such as Cannon Budge, who's in that mix. and Layden Robinson, their safety, who is also in their mix. And so I want to say for the most part here, they are returning their entire secondary, which I would say was probably the best in all of 5A last year. I mean, both Pacheco and Nicholson went ahead and made our all Playmaker team last year. And, you know, they're both guys that we are looking at for our top 5 seniors list going into this year. Both really tough cornerbacks, same as well as Kanan Budge and the safety over there, Layden Robinson. I want to say all 4 of those guys that I just mentioned will be seniors this year. So they've been doing this thing for a minute, you know, and so that is definitely one of the strengths of this defense here, revolving around those 4 guys. You also have linebacker Jaden Anatone here. He had 55 tackles last year. He should definitely be somebody added to the mix there, or considered to be in the mix there at linebacker to help replace some of the production from Brett Alvey, at least do it best he can. Not senior, but freshman. He will be an incoming sophomore though. But freshman Caleb Petrie also got some, he got some snaps on defense as well at linebacker. And, you know, for Pine Creek, you don't really see them play too many freshmen. And so if you can get any sort of varsity snaps, that's definitely impressive. Petrie's definitely another person in that linebacker mix to look out for. But another one that I do want to talk about that also is going to be a pretty big impact on offense as well. I'm going to talk about him on defense real quick here, is the senior athlete Mason Miller. He had 59 tackles and 4 interceptions, top 3 in interceptions, top 10 in tackles. He will be going to Iowa State. I don't know if he's going to be playing running back or linebacker, but the 6'2", 223-pound athlete is a beast regardless. And so that's definitely somebody that's going to add to this defense. So this Pine Creek defense, in my opinion, they're going to be just fine. They're going to find a way to get it done. They have enough pieces, in my opinion, to really contend. Now, speaking of Mason Miller here, he's going to really help spearhead this offense, though, that will be returning basically their entire backfield. Mason Miller, I want to say, is the only senior in this backfield, or incoming senior in this backfield. But last year, I mean, he ran for 1,311 yards and 14 rushing touchdowns. Also caught 6 receptions for 126 yards and a touchdown. Definitely looking at him to be kind of the workhorse, the power back for Pine Creek moving forward. But alongside him came Jonathan Core, who really emerged as a sophomore, as more of the speedier, shifty back here. And, you know, he actually also hit 1,000 yards, 1,019 yards to be exact, and rushed for 12 rushing touchdowns, also adding 7 receptions, 97 yards, and a touchdown. That duo alone rushed for over 2,000 yards and over 20 touchdowns. 2 really good backs running behind a pretty solid offensive line here. Really love this offensive line. I think they'll have one of the best ones in all of Colorado and all of 5A for sure here. Let's start on the interior here. You have both of these guys being incoming seniors, by the way, and both definitely in consideration for our top 5 seniors list this upcoming year for the class of 2023. But that is Connor Laxon and Carson Kaplan, both pretty good linemen. They have been pretty good linemen starting last year as well as juniors here. Laxon 6'2", 267 here. Kaplan 6'3", 290. You know, both of these guys will definitely be big time contributors. You'll also have standout. I want to say he will be an incoming junior here. Yep, incoming junior Devontae Johnson here, aka DJ Johnson, 6'5", 275. He's probably bigger, honestly, by this point here. And then you also have other guys like Tristan Randall, who are definitely going to contribute a little bit more as well. But for the most part, you are working with that core group of linemen, those 3 there. And so to return those 3 is absolutely huge, really 4. So I want to say last year Regis played center, and then you had Laxon and Kaplan at guard, and then you had Devontae and Randall at tackle. And so you're really only losing I mean, it's not like it's not a big loss, but you're really only losing one lineman in Tanner Regis, so you could definitely do worse here. But returning the majority of their line, they should honestly definitely see improvements as well, and so that'll only help this run game that will be dominant going into this year. But I gotta talk about the guy under center, Cameron Cooper. Cam Coop played as a sophomore here. Last year was his first year starting, actually, and he did all right, throwing for 1,536 passing yards, 15 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, also had 160 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. Definitely struggled at times. His completion rating is at a 54.5%, which is not the worst it could be, but also it's not like, he's passing a whole ton either, and so you definitely have to make the most of what you have, which I get it. It could definitely be a little bit of pressure there, but to really take that next step forward here and not only be a contender, but be a state champion, he needs to take over games. He needs to play better. There was one game in particular, that really stood out to me, and that was the Regis Jesuit game here. He had a season high 28 attempts and only completed 15, and that's not great, obviously. And, a lot of the time Pine Creek is leading, so it's not like he has to do a whole lot, but hopefully he could take that next step forward as a quarterback and really solidify his position as one of the best quarterbacks in Colorado here. And, what more to solidify that by winning a state championship. And so, honestly, I think if he could get to 30 passing touchdowns and maybe 2,000 yards total, over 2,000 yards total between passing and rushing, then, hey, we're talking. This is a true contender, and they're going to be tough. It's going to be tough to stop Miller and Core in this line in general, but to also stop Cameron Cooper, that's a whole nother story. That's definitely a whole nother story here. And so I really think he could be the X factor in all of this. And before I move on and start talking about this upcoming schedule here, let me go ahead and talk about one player that might really emerge as a lead receiver, and that is tight end Kai Goetze. I think he's a great talent here. I want to say he will be an incoming senior, and so, this is going to be one of his last years, obviously. Well, his last year to prove himself, in pads and whatnot. I know what he could do in sevens. I think he could be a big-time receiver for Cam Cooper here, and that could be huge for Pine Creek and for them to win state, obviously, as well. So we'll obviously just have to see what happens. And honestly, I know there's a whole lot more of Pine Creek players that I know about as well, because this is also when, you got guys from that class of 26 that might be coming in to fill some roles here or get some playing time. So I'm thinking of guys like Amari Kyle, Jaden Rinn, just to name a few there. Emmanuel Hill, he's not, a 26, but he's a 25. Those are some younger guys that I think could get involved. Didn't talk about them too much, but wouldn't be surprised if they really got into the mix here. So there you go there. I mean, Pine Creek, as always, stacked, but I think if there was any year for them to win state, I think this has to be the year, right? Now let's go ahead and go through their schedule before we start projecting too far off here, right? So first off, to start the season, they play August 25th. That's a Friday. They host Las Vegas at home. That should definitely be a dub. After that, they go ahead and play Valor Christian at home. That is a game that I am looking to attend to personally here. And I am going to go ahead and say that is a loss here. I don't know. I don't know. It makes me nervous because I think Valor Christian is definitely a team that they could get on and, get a pretty solid 14 to 10 point lead here. And if they do that, I trust them to probably win it at that point. But also Valor, this is a gritty team. Don't be surprised if they're the comeback kids this year. And so I would definitely not rule out Valor here. I think Valor is going to be tough. You got to stop that run game. And then I also expect their quarterback, Asher Weiner, to be pretty good. I think they're going to throw with him a lot more this season, or, a lot more than last year at least. And that's going to be the difference, right? Now, this is still a winnable game. You're at home too, so I would expect it to still be a winnable game. But if there's any team I expected them to potentially struggle against, it might be Valor here, especially if they go down. If they go down, I don't know if they could come back. We will see here. We'll need to see some signature performances from multiple players, not just one. All right, now Vista Ridge. This will be played on a Saturday, which is interesting here. September 9th. They should beat Vista Ridge. I mean, they beat them last year with Braden Dorman, BB Hills, Joe Garnett, that squad. I think this year they should be able to beat them again. They play Denver East. East will be better, but that should be a dub. Mullen should be a dub. They play Fountain Fort Carson. They have 2 really good running backs over there and some good pieces, but I think that should still be a dub there. I think Pine Creek's the more complete team. They then play Regis Jesuit, who is losing a lot of players here, but it's Regis. Just looked at the roster and did their season preview here. I think they are pretty solid here. They will be pretty good, and Pine Creek really should take advantage of that inexperience. This shouldn't be a game they lose, but it could potentially be a trap game, so look out. Then they play Legend here, and this one is away in Parker. Legend's tough. I think Legend truly has the best running back group out of any team in Colorado. And I would say, as far as running back groups go, Legend is probably number 1, and then, Pine Creek is behind them for sure, I would say. They run 3 deep for sure, or 4 deep, really. So they're going to be a tough team to beat here. Definitely still beatable. I wouldn't cross that out as a team they would beat. If they beat Valor, I think they could definitely beat Legend. But who knows? I honestly truly believe Cam Cooper will be the difference maker in that one, because Legend will be playing a new quarterback. If Cam Cooper can't play better than that new quarterback, then, we got some issues there. So definitely expecting him to play better and be the difference maker, but will be a tough game. I'm going to give it to Legend right now here. Just to be safe, right? Just to be safe. And then Douglas County, Chaparral, they should beat both of them. And so altogether, the predicted record I have for Pine Creek is 8-2. But 8-2 is really their floor for me, not ceiling. Their ceiling is undefeated. So their window of wins for Pine Creek is 8 to 10 wins here. Look, you got so much talent. And I'm just going through every single level, from the line to the skill players to the quarterback, from the defensive line to the linebackers to the corners to the DBs. I mean, you have so much talent here. You got to win eventually, right? You got to win state eventually. I think this is their year. I think with Cherry Creek losing all the guys they have, with Valor losing some key guys as well. I mean, they're losing the majority of their offensive line, plus Trey Stott, and Roman Bradley. So that's definitely tough. I'm looking at that, and I'm saying, I think Pine Creek can go to state, and I think they could win state. Now, I think the bigger question is, can the entire team buy into that? I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's either Valor or Cherry Creek mindset. Talked about it on the culture episode. Not going to get into it on this episode, but I think that is definitely something that, it might be in the minds of some players and coaches here. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to call out anybody specifically, but from things that I've heard, I don't like that. And so mentally, you got to take that step forward, because you are not the underdog. You should be the bully in most of these games. Really, there's no team that should be the bully of you in any of these games. There's no team in the state that should bully you. Period. Right? And so I'm going to need Pine Creek to start playing like that. It's great to be winning, some of these games against solid programs like Fountain Fort Carson, Vista, all that stuff, right? But you got to start beating the big dogs, because that's where you belong. And so this year, you got to make statement wins. I think beating Grandview last year, that was huge, because I remember everyone was saying Grandview was going to win it, even without Liam Zarka. I heard some of that too, and that was obviously not true. You still beat him, right? With Zarka, I think they probably still beat him, but it would have been closer for sure. And so going into this year, you have to take that mental step forward if you are Pine Creek. They have the talent. They have the coaching, At the end of the day, you got to be the bully. That's all it comes down to against these contenders. You're in the new tier now, so the expectations naturally rise. And so that's all I'm going to say about Pine Creek, but should be a really successful year for them and potentially a state championship visit, if not win. All right, now let's go ahead and move on and talk about Doherty, the other 5A team here in Colorado Springs here. Starting with their season, went 7-3 in the regular season, which was exactly right. I predicted the record exactly right. So they were one of those two teams, at least on this episode, that I predicted exactly right. So boom, there you go there. Let's talk about the regular season here. I mean, it pretty much went as expected. Lost to Castle View 31-21, but bounced back with wins over Rampart and Coronado. Then would lose to Mesa and Fountain Fort Carson before rattling off basically an undefeated record in league, beating Mountain Range, Denver East, Westminster, Northland, and Overland to go ahead and make the playoffs at 7-3. And like I said, their regular season schedule predicted every single game to the T. That's what I'm talking about. Knew this team really well here, so there you go there. Then they went to playoffs to play Thunder Ridge, and this was a Thunder Ridge team that, started DJ Bordeaux. And this was his first start in the playoffs, which is kind of a tough go, because I think if they played Cooper Kier, there would have been a very, very solid reason to believe that they could beat Thunder Ridge, because they were stopping the run against them, is what I heard and saw. So, unfortunately though, DJ eventually figured it out and they lost 38-10. So there you go. But still a pretty solid season by Doherty here. I mean, you have to be happy here going 7-3, winning your league, and then making the playoffs and losing to Thunder Ridge, who would make a pretty, solid playoff run. So that's not the worst thing. For sure though. And also it was a relatively close playoff game, so can't be mad at that. But let's go ahead and talk about the graduating seniors. There is a pretty solid amount here. First off, they're graduating their senior quarterback here, Caden Becker. I felt like he could take a step forward as a quarterback last season, and he did. He passed for 1,989 yards, 21 touchdowns, so only 4 interceptions. Also a very efficient 63, almost 64% completion percentage there. Got to love that. Also added 354 rushing yards, and 4 rushing touchdowns for a combined 25 touchdowns there. That's pretty big time. That's definitely pretty big time there. It's gonna be hard to replace that. He was a senior quarterback, so there haven't been many other quarterbacks taking snaps here, so that's definitely gonna be hard to replace. On top of that, they are also losing their top 2 rushers, really top 4 rushers, if you include Becker here. And let's talk about the running backs, since we're already on the topic. Ricky Fletcher, another guy that I felt like could take a step forward here. He ran for 1,209 yards, 16 rushing touchdowns. Marquise Herrera, he was in the mix as well. Second leading rusher with 385 yards and 7 touchdowns. And then you have Becker there as the third rusher as well. So that's tough. That's obviously tough there. And actually, I think Herrera might have had more. I'm seeing his name here twice. So that definitely is his yard. So losing your top 2 running backs, not real easy to replace there. You're losing your entire backfield at that point. So there you go there. Now on defense, they're also having some players that they are losing here, which is going to be pretty tough. Mikey Smith here. He had 56 tackles and 4 sacks. I want to say he was the sack leader with those 4, or I guess co-sack leader with like 3 other guys. One of those other guys also being Armando Solano, who had 47 tackles and 4 sacks, who's also graduating. So there you go. I think those 2 guys were pretty much the main seniors, along with Felix as well, that they're also losing as tackle leaders. Altogether, though, they're losing 7 of their top 13 tackle leaders. That includes their 2 sack leaders in Solano and Smith, or I guess 2 of the 4 that had 4 sacks there. And then on top of that, they are losing a couple guys who snagged a interception here. Felix, who snagged 2, and then you also have Ricky Fletcher, and then you also have Green, who snagged 1 each. So losing some guys on the defensive side here, roughly half of your defense. It's really not the worst thing that could happen. I mean, they returned their 2 top tackle leaders, which we'll talk about in a minute, but they do lose their backfield, quarterback, 2 running backs. I mean, they produced a lot for them, and obviously that quarterback playing so well, obviously, you need somebody to throw to your receivers, and so that will be interesting to see what happens moving forward, if they could, maybe replace him or find a guy who could be serviceable. So there you go. But let's talk about key players here, starting with Solomon Latimer, their star wide receiver, career highs with 79 receptions, 1,110 yards, 12 receiving touchdowns. He is the wideout 1 of Doherty. He is one of the best receivers in the state, definitely somebody who I want to say made our all Playmaker team and is also in consideration for a top 5 seniors list for receivers going into this year. That's a great weapon to be bringing back for whatever young quarterback or inexperienced quarterback steps into the fold here. So there you go there. Talking about receivers just a little bit more here, they also returned Logan Hutchin, I want to say. He had 34 receptions, 511 receiving yards, 6 receiving touchdowns. I mean, he's a physical receiver who could throw good blocks, and I mean, just altogether a very solid pass catcher. He will also be an incoming senior this year. So there you go there. 2 of those guys. You also have, I want to say this is Brian Valdez, who had 15 receptions, 190 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So your top 3 receivers, at least, will be coming back. So whatever quarterback, hops into the situation should have a relatively okay situation to work with. It would just be more of a matter of finding that chemistry, since these guys have been catching passes from Becker for at least the last 2 years. So there you go there. But switching over to the defensive side of the ball, you have a defense that I think they're going to pretty much lean on here and really hope that they work out and, carry them through maybe some growing pains on offense. So we'll see about that. But they're led by lead tackler and linebacker Micah Jacobs, the incoming senior. He had 108 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks last year. He has been big time for this defense 2 sacks last year. He has been big time for this defense for a really long time here. Should be a captain going into this year. We'll see about that, but definitely somebody that you could build your defense around and kind of help bring in a new group of guys to replace that 7 or so tacklers, lead tacklers out of the 13 that you are losing. Right next to him as well, you also have Brian Valdez, who, like I said, was the 3rd leading receiver in offense, but on defense was the 2nd leading tackler with 66 tackles. So those 2 guys, really looking at them to continue to turn up here as well and lead a defense, which I think will be pretty solid. Also, I believe you have Sean Cooper, who contributed 55 tackles, will also be an incoming senior. So boom, there you go there. And he also had 4 sacks. He's one of the guys who will be returning with, I guess you can't say co-leader, maybe quad leader, because 4 of those guys were all tied for 4 sacks. But either way, great production coming back for Doherty. I think their defense will be okay. I'm definitely a little bit more concerned about the offense there, because at the end of the day, you need a quarterback who's competent and could get these receivers the ball. And on top of that, it would also be nice to have a running back or 2 to lean on as well. And these last 2 in Herrera and Fletcher, I mean, they've been playing for 2 or 3 years. So not too many other guys have been getting snaps there. But before I move on to the predicted record, this was kind of a slight last second thing that I found here. But in addition to Sean Cooper and Hayden D. Miller coming back on the offensive line, and I want to say maybe the defensive line as well, you also have incoming junior Maddox Richardson, 6'6", 280 pounds. This kid is a beast. He will look to anchor down, I want to say, at least his left tackle spot. That's where I saw him playing at it. That's probably where I would project him and put him as well. And so he'll be returning as a defensive lineman and a big-time player on that offensive line here. And so Doherty, they have some good pieces here. You have some good pieces, a lot of experience though. Once this group graduates, I don't know what they're going to do from there, but one season at a time here. Let's go ahead and look at their record here. Or sorry, not the record. Let's look at their schedule here. That's what I meant. And predict the record for this upcoming season. So, to start out, they play Castleview. I think this is a loss. Castleview, they return a pretty good defense, headlined by Jordan Ochoa, who's nasty. And then they also have a really good offensive line, and they have some good pieces in general over there. This will probably be maybe more of a defensive game, if anything, as both are losing pretty significant pieces on offense. But, it definitely still could be a winnable one. But for now, I'm going to give this one to Castleview still here. Following that, they play Rampart. I think they're bigger than Rampart up front. Regardless of losing these guys, I think they should still be able to beat them. That should be a dub. Same with Coronado, same reasons there. But then they play Mesa Ridge here. And this is where the loss of their backfield really concerns me, because Mesa Ridge has a lot of firepower. Trayvon Salas, Isaiah Jones, beast. The quarterback, Bryce Real, he had a breakout season last year. He's going to be a beast as well. It would really be up to this Doherty defense to stop them. And why I think they could stop the run to a degree. I think they might have some issues in the pass game potentially here. And my bad. Another key player I forgot to talk about was Marcus Chacon. He's one of the few DBs returning. He actually led with 5 interceptions. 4 of them were against North Glen. So he should help out with that. But even then, I just don't know. I think I have Mesa Ridge winning this one. So there you go there. Then they play Fountain Fort Carson. This should definitely be closer because they will be losing guys like Tavion Tooley, Ty Fave, Josiah Steven Silva. Just a couple guys there. But they return a really good offensive line and 2 really good backs in Matthias Price and Khalid Smith. That is going to be a handful. And so I think that will be a loss. But then they open up with league play here against Mountain Range. That will be away. I think that's a dub there. Then they play Denver East at home. This should be a really interesting game. I would love to make this one, actually. It should be close, right? I think Denver East will be a tougher team this year than they were last year. Last year, they were definitely a little bit younger. And, this year, they got guys like Declan McDonald, DJ Crow, who I really feel like are going to be some of the best players in the entire state this year. And so I'm going to give the slight edge to Denver East. If Doherty could figure out their quarterback situation and, he's slinging the rock to Hutchin and Latimer, then yeah, I think that's definitely a Doherty dub. But I don't know. That's still a tough go, though. That's still a tough go. So I'm going to tentatively call that a loss here. But it could go either way. After that, they play Westminster, North Glen. Those should both be dubs. Then they play Overland here. And honestly, I think this is going to be a lot closer of a game. Overland has some talent in that backfield. I really like Andre Veasley, their quarterback, and their running back, Jarius Ward, who's tough to tackle. He's a tough back in general. I think that's a loss, but that's another game that I could potentially see them winning. But I will call it a loss. And so right now, I have their predicted record at 5-5, which I think is pretty solid here. Window of wins of 3 to 6 here. Look, Doherty, they have a solid team. Good skill players, solid size up front, solid players returning on defense. But the lack of experience in this backfield is extremely concerning, as they are going to play some teams with some, solid quarterbacks and skill players that could score. And if you can't keep up, that puts a lot of pressure on your defense to just turn up all the time and be one of the better defenses in the state. And they're a good defense. I think they're above average. I just don't think they are that, though. And so we'll see here. At best, I could definitely see them finishing over 500. That's why I gave them a window of wins of 3 to 6, 6 being the ceiling there. But that would probably mean beating either Denver East or Overland. I don't think they beat both. If they do beat both, they're making the playoffs. But I really think they need to beat one of these teams to make the playoffs because, I mean, they're going to pick a team from this league to make it, right? And so I think those two teams are the teams that are really going to contend for this league title with Doherty. And so this is going to be a really interesting league between East, between Overland, between Doherty. I'm going to have a lot of fun, watching that one. I'm going to try to go to more of those games as well. But there you go there. Predicted record 5-5. Window of wins though 3-6. We'll just have to see what happens. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about Air Academy here. In the regular season, they went 6-4. Which, it wasn't the predicted record. It's actually reversed. I thought they would go 4-6, but I gave them a window of wins of 4-6 there. Them winning 6 wins being their ceiling, and that's what they did. And so they are one of the 3 out of 10 teams on this episode that were within that window of wins there. So still, in the ballpark for sure. So there you go there. But let's kind of talk about what happened last season. Started the season off great, beating Liberty as they should, 53-8. Then they went to Widefield, and this was a great game that I went to personally. This was extremely fun here. And they lost them 42-34 in a shootout. I mean, this was a winnable game, in my opinion. I thought they could have won this one, and they just came up short. And so that definitely happens. But they would bounce back and rattle off 4 wins in a row, blowing out Sand Creek 40-12, blowing out Sierra 48-7. Lost a close one to won a close one against Coronado 63-56. Jeez. Talk about shootout there. And then they won another shootout the next week against Cheyenne Mountain 42-39. So 2 really close shootout wins there. And then they lost to Vista Ridge and Palmer Ridge. Then they beat Falcon 19-15 in a close one here, winning a lot of close games, but would lose a close game to end the season against Rampart, who they lost to 21-14. Still good enough, though, to make the playoffs. They were right on that edge, right into the end, but still good enough to make the playoffs. I think that Rampart game, losing to them kind of closer than, obviously a blowout, kind of put them in there. So there you go there. Now, and then in the playoffs, they lost to Erie 49-7, and that was not close. But, now let's talk about some of the players that really contributed to this run, because this was one of the best Air Academy football seasons in recent years. And, that starts with their graduating senior, Sam Beers. Air Academy legend, Colorado football legend here. He ran for 1,585 rushing yards and 21 rushing touchdowns that season there. I also believe he caught a couple passes, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns on 7 receptions. He's at the Colorado School of Mines right now. And, Beers, I mean, he was an absolute beast. They've been leaning on him so hard the last 3 seasons here, and he's delivered. He's had some excellent games here that I just don't think that not many players for Air Academy could really do again. I mean, he had a 216-yard game against Liberty. He had a 381-yard game against Coronado. 346-yard game, against Cheyenne Mountain there. And that 2-game stretch with Coronado and Cheyenne Mountain, I mean, he ran for over 700 yards and 9 touchdowns in 2 games. So that's crazy. That's definitely crazy. I don't think you're going to replace him that easily. So there you go there. But talking about some other players that are also graduating as well, to add a little bit more insult to injury, you have quarterback Braden Daughtry here, I think it's, or maybe it's Doherty here. Excuse me, sorry, I've never actually figured out how to say his name. But the quarterback here, I mean, he had a pretty solid season, best of his high school career, throwing for 1,380 yards, 18 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, and then also rushed for a handful of yards here as well. He had 3 rushing touchdowns, so that's definitely big time there, as he was a huge part of this offense too, being kind of that second production guy for Air Academy. They're also losing receiver Joey McLaughlin. He had 373 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, but also had 500 3 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns with 29 receptions there. He was the lead receiver and second rusher, so just a great athlete altogether to be losing there. So there you go there. On defense, you're losing the Krasinski brothers. Shelton, he had 91 tackles. He was the lead tackler. Stanton, he was the second leading tackler with 74. Those two guys kind of top off a pretty senior-heavy defense here that is losing 10 of their top 13 tacklers. So not only are you losing your backfield and, the main producers on offense, but you're also losing some of the main producers on defense here. So that is definitely not good here, as Air Academy is going to look to figure something out there. And so going into this year, right, you have some players to work with here. I think there was a rumor out there that Baruch Johnson from Pine Creek was going to transfer to Air Academy, but then last I checked, he was in Illinois. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to Air Academy. And so that definitely leaves a hole at quarterback. I think if they got Baruch Johnson, that would have still put them in the same range of wins. Without him, I mean, now you're looking at replacing quarterbacks and, finding a guy, hoping you have a guy. And then you still have to replace Sam Beers, which I don't know if you could ever really do. So that's tough. But with the players you do have bring back, you have David Rogers, right? He's going into his senior year, should be wide at 1. He had 17 receptions, 325 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. Kind of has that second receiving option. I think he's solid. Wouldn't be surprised if they run the offense through him. Maybe just kind of throw him in there at running back and just see what happens. I don't know. I don't know if that's the best thing to do, but, we'll see about that. But, they also have another weapon in incoming junior tight end. He's 6'4", Caleb Kaseka, I want to say. If I'm saying that wrong, excuse me, I'm sorry. But he had 169 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. I mean, he's a solid receiving threat as well. Only will be a junior. I think he could have a breakout season if you had a quarterback. He's kind of your jump ball guy. Rogers is more of your speedster playmaker. Caleb here is more of your jump ball tight end, and so you could definitely live with that. We'll see what happens, though. He also was a solid contributor on defense. And then you have Gabe Delamuth here. He had 200 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Probably should be in the mix for that starting running back role for Air Academy. So there you go there. I think those 3 guys will be some guys to really look out for here. I'm sure there are plenty of other dudes, but there's just not a lot of varsity film on those players. And so this year will definitely be a little rough. I'm not going to lie. I mean, you need a quarterback, right? And they don't have one. You need a running back who could replace Beers, and they graduate their top 2 rusher. I mean, so that's not going to be easy to come by. And even then, I don't know if you're going to have a guy who could just run casually for 300 yards. So there's that. So I don't know. It's going to be a rough year, but let's just look at their schedule and try to predict their record best we can. Against Liberty, I think that's a loss. Without Beers, without their quarterback, I just think this one, it will probably be close. I think for the first time in a couple years, this will be a very close game. I just have a hard time seeing Air Academy win this game, especially with Liberty returning so much, and we'll talk about them on this episode too later. But moving on, they play Widefield. I think they for sure lose that one. They're getting in a transfer in TJ Washington from Harrison. That's definitely an upgrade, so that'll be tough. Plus, they return Paul Mitchell, so that's just tough. Then they play Sand Creek. I think this will be close, but I have them winning it tentatively. I know Sand Creek is trying to change some stuff over there, having a more modern system and whatnot, but I'm just not sure. They graduate 2 of the guys they tried out at quarterback last year, so that's obviously not good. I think they could win that one. Same with Sierra. I think they could win that game if they could just control the game against the squad and not let Michael Lumpkin go like crazy off for like 300 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. That is a winnable game, Definitely still be tough. But then they play Coronado. They barely won this game in a shootout. Also, no Sam Beers, who went crazy in that game. I think that's a loss. Same with Cheyenne Mountain. That was another shootout. I think that is another loss there. We'll talk about Cheyenne Mountain later this episode too. Then they play Vista Ridge, Palmer Ridge, Falcon, Rampart. I think all 4 of those are losses. Those are 4 teams that I think could definitely make the playoffs. And so altogether, my predicted record for Air Academy is 2-8 with the window of wins between 1 and 4. Look, I'm just going to say this. I thought Baruch Johnson to this team was going to be a done deal here. It was not. I think that's a major blow losing him because I think he could have really helped make up for some of that production. And then you have losing Sam Beers. They have really leaned on him these last couple years. So it's just really hard to be like, yeah, they're going to be just fine without Sam Beers, who, you know, is a guy that could casually go off for 300 to 400 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. That is not like a normal thing to replace. You don't see that on many teams. And so I just have a hard time seeing them win many games. I could see them beating Liberty, right? I could maybe see them beating Coronado. But at the same time, I could see Sand Creek beating them. Same with Sierra. So who knows there? Like I said, I have them going 2-8 with a window of wins of 1 and 4. We'll just have to see. Playmakers other than the guys I just listed will definitely have to step up for them to do better. So, yeah. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about Coronado here. They were one of the 2 teams on this episode that I predicted the record like extremely wrong. I was just wrong about. And not in a good way. You know, I put way too much faith in them, and then they went 0-10. Which is not good, and I gave them a window of wins of 4 to 6 here. They only had 6 games scheduled at the time when I did their season preview last year, and I really felt like, you know, they could win at least 3 of those games, and they did not. They lost to everyone. I said they might beat Rampart, lost 45-0. They might be Air Academy. That was a close one, but they lost 63 to 56. I said they could beat Falcon. They lost 41-19. And then I also said they could sneak in wins against Cheyenne Mountain, who they lost to 39-21, and Doherty, who they definitely lost to 42-17. So Coronado definitely let me down. I put a little bit too much faith in them. I felt like, you know, they had guys like Aiden Blanco and Aiden Luna who, you know, really gave them a lot of size up front. And I thought they were going to be good, starting both on the offensive and defensive line. Blanco got hurt, and then it was just Luna there, so that's tough. And they just did not play as well as I thought they would be. Yeah, that's it. I mean, they just did not play as well as I thought they would be. But since we're already talking about some of the guys they lost, I mean, Aiden Luna, Aiden Blanco, both big body dudes. They're losing both of them. So that's 2 guys off the defensive and offensive line. You have Ethan Ocampo. He had 31 receptions, 332 yards there. It wasn't like he wasn't the lead receiver, but, you know, he definitely contributed a lot as a second leading receiver there. So you're losing your second leading receiver. You're also losing Dylan Jardin. I thought as a senior, he was potentially a 1,000-yard guy, but it looks like he got hurt. And so he's gone. You know, I mean, that's definitely talent that you're losing there. So there you go there. And then you're also losing their kicker. Now, can't talk about their defense because they have no stats for some reason recorded on defense, but they have all their offensive stats recorded, which is just really strange here. Not that their defense did well, you know, this season. I mean, jeez, man. They allowed an average of at least 40 points per game. I mean, it's tough. And then the lowest amount of points they allowed was 39. So it's not like this defense is great to begin with. They're going to have to do some going regardless of who they're bringing back. So there you go there. But let's talk about some key players here. Let's start with their quarterback, right? Let's start with their quarterback, Jackson Gutowski here, entering his senior year. So last year he was a junior, and he had an all right year, a really productive year throwing the ball. I mean, he threw for 2,152 yards, 54% completion, which is fine. Threw 11 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, which is not the worst thing. Still threw for over 2,000 yards, and he was also the lead rusher with 304 yards. So he has shown that he's a pretty solid athlete here. I mean, if you just look at his highlight reel alone, he looks nice, and he displays a very strong arm, also with exceptional athleticism. I think if he cleans some things up in his game, sooner than later, he could take a step forward and be a really good quarterback for Coronado, probably one of the best ones in Colorado Springs. So there you go there. So that's definitely a bright spot. The other bright spot is Reality Smith. He made our watch list last year as a late addition, as a safety. And, he did have a solid year at safety, but at receiver, he was a beast, catching 54 receptions for 969 yards. No touchdowns, though. Or at least no listed touchdowns, but that definitely can't be right, actually, now that I'm looking about it. He definitely caught a couple of touchdowns, as I guess they just did not record any touchdowns, which is weird. Come on, Coronado, what are you doing over there? But either way, he's a bigger receiver at around 6'2", 6'3"-ish. Great athleticism. He's undoubtedly the number one receiver, uses his frame really well here. I think this is a guy that could potentially be a top 5 senior receiver. We will see, if not at least an honorable mention. So there you go there. Reality Smith, he's going to be a problem his senior year, along with his quarterback Jackson. And then another incoming senior is David Moore. He was actually the lead rusher. That was not Katowski here, with 239 yards here. Like I said, did not record any touchdowns. Coronado didn't, so I don't know how many touchdowns he had. I think if he continues to improve, that will help alleviate some pressure off of their quarterback, either him or Luke Dow, who was right behind him in yards. They need to figure it out. Dow, he had 140 yards on only 45 carries. So there you go there. And then one more receiver I want to talk about is Zen Groves. As a sophomore, he caught 17 receptions for 281 yards. That's pretty good. That's 16.5 yards a catch there. And so I think it could be a solid second receiver here and help form a good duo with Reality here. But football is just more than your offense. I'm definitely concerned about this defense here. If the best you could do is hold a team to 39 points, I don't know. I don't know how much better this defense could possibly get. They would have to be leaps and bounds here. On top of that, you're definitely losing some guys up front here, so maybe you won't have as much time throwing the ball, and so that'll also affect the running game. Definitely concerned, about the defense and defense as a whole, and then the line here for Coronado here, because I really think if the line was better, this would be a much different team here. But, you gotta work with what you got. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and look at their schedule here and talk about this next season. So to start, they open up against Rampart here. I think that's a loss. Rampart, they blew them out last year, and they're returning some more players. I believe we're going to talk about Rampart here later in this episode, so stay tuned for that. But they're also returning their starting running back, who I really like. I think this defense is going to have issues stopping him. Then they play Lewis Palmer. I think this could be a closer one. Coronado could make them nervous, but I really expect Lewis Palmer to just control the pace of the game. Just feed it to the running backs, which they did last year. And I think they will be fine. Also, their quarterback last year as well was a pretty big-time contributor, both as a rusher and passer. I think Lewis Palmer will be fine. That's going to be tough for Coronado to beat. Then they play Doherty, that's a loss. They play Pueblo Central. I think that is also a loss there. They have a lot of skill players over there. That'll be tough. They play Air Academy. I think this could be a win. It's one of the few games on their schedule that is winnable, in my opinion. That's if Gutowski and Smith takes over, and they're efficient as well. They can't have too many turnovers now, because Air Academy is losing a solid amount. I think they have enough stars to take over that game here. Groves would probably have to get more involved there. Like I said, can't have too many turnovers. Then they play Falcon, Mesa Ridge, Pueblo West. I think those are all losses, just teams with, a lot more skill players coming back, which I look at this defense and I don't think they could stop them. Then they play Cheyenne Mountain. That was a closer game, I want to say, last year. 39-21, I guess. But I just don't think they could beat him. They returned Bruce Archambault as a senior quarterback, and so that's going to be a tough one. And so my predicted record for Coronado is 1-8 with a win over wins of 0-3. Could definitely see them not winning a game this year, I could also see them winning 3 at most, but that feels like a stretch to me. I'm not going to lie. I'm still going to give it to them, but it feels like a stretch. I think Air Academy is one of their, more winnable games, and then maybe they could beat Central, like Pueblo Central or Lewis Palmer, but that would really mean their defense just keying in on the run and holding all of those skill players at least to under 200, maybe 150 yards. And then also the offense would have to play well too. You can't have turnovers, right? And you have to score too. I think that's probably one of the biggest things. I feel like Coronado was moving the ball at times, but they just couldn't get it done. So that's definitely a red flag. So I don't know. Maybe they could beat Pueblo Central or Lewis Palmer. But like I said, that's a stretch. I think realistically, they could beat Air Academy. That would be their one win on the season. But even then, I could see Air Academy winning that one. Who knows? So there you go. We'll have to see. And it's just a shame because I really like Katowski here. I like Reality Smith. Zen Groves has shown us some things. But they got to do a little bit more. So there you go there. That's Coronado's season preview. All right, now moving on. Let's talk about Cheyenne Mountain here. This is an interesting one because tomorrow, today when this episode drops, I'm talking in those terms, but today the episode drops, right? But tomorrow, right after this one, so it should be PMC episode 282, is going to be an interview with Cheyenne Mountain's quarterback, Bruce Archambault, the senior quarterback over there. And so we talk a lot about this season preview, and so go ahead and check that one out after you listen to this here. But let's talk about last year here. I predicted them to go 6-2 with a WOW 5-7. Instead, they fell just a little bit short here, going 4-6. So I was just one game off the window of wins. They are one of the 3 teams out of 10 here who are in that category, at least on this episode. So there you go there. Now, looking at where I went wrong here in predictions, I said they should beat Pueblo East. They got blown out 47-17. That East team took a pretty significant step forward. Then I said they should beat Central, Greeley Central. They beat them 42-18. And then I said they should beat Pueblo Centennial, who they did beat 16-14. That was a crazy game, which, like I said, we'll talk about on tomorrow's interview with Bruce. But still beat him. And then I said they should beat Rampart, but they lost 55-14 here. I did say, though, I am going to say this. I did question if they could win in shootouts, and I said that would affect the record. And, they lost their one shootout against Air Academy, which was tough, right? So there you go there. Those are a couple of the games here. I said they could lose to Air Academy or Coronado. Lost to Air Academy, beat Coronado. So those are some of the differences there in my prediction versus what happened. On the season, though, went 4-6, not bad. I mean, you beat Greeley Central, Canyon City, Centennial, Pueblo Centennial, then you beat Coronado at the end of the season. I knew they were going to lose to Vista Ridge and Palmer Ridge. Rampart, I thought they could beat. Air Academy, I thought they could beat. Also knew they would lose to Denver South, but, it's Denver South. So they had a really tough schedule. So there you go there. But let's talk about some graduating seniors here, starting with Zach Johnson. He was their leading rusher with 1,090 rushing yards. Also had 7 rushing touchdowns. As a receiver, he was tied for the 3rd receiving spot with 18 receptions, 205 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. Last year, I said I expect him to take a big step forward, have a breakout season, and he did. So there you go there. He was a big part of this offense. Then you have Gabriel Lucas, who, speaking of big parts of the offense, he was a huge part of it as the lead receiver with 927 receiving yards and 12 receiving touchdowns. He also had 39 tackles and 3 interceptions, led the team in picks here. So that is another great athlete that you are losing. They're also losing their second lead receiver in Brody Dwyer. He had 13 receptions, 245 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. And then on defense here, you're losing some key guys here, some size up front, which is definitely a little concerning. Hayden Kuppenmeyer, he had 69 tackles, nice, and he also had an additional, I think he had 3 sacks. Yep, he had 3 sacks, and he was the sack leader with 3, or co-sack leader with 3. But the other guy who had 3 sacks was Jake Quadhammer, who they are also losing as well here. Jake here, he had 15 tackles. So there you go. There are 2 guys up front that it's going to be tough to lose. On top of that, they are losing their tackle here on the offensive line, Lucas Geiger. So that is going to be a tough one to replace. That's not going to be an easy one to replace, as he was 6'6", 270 pounds. So that's tough. So you're losing some guys there, losing a lot of skill players, losing a lineman. You're also losing 6 of your top 13 tacklers, and then I want to say 2 more offensive linemen. So a pretty solid amount of players they're losing here. I think the bright side, at least on defense, I mean, you're not losing that many guys. You're still returning some pretty solid players here. So there you go. But speaking of key players, solid players, more than solid, let's start with Bruce Archambault. The quarterback for Cheyenne Mountain will be an incoming senior quarterback, but last year threw for 1,760 passing yards, 20 touchdowns to 13 picks, a little high on that end there, but also rushed for 145 yards and a touchdown as the second leading rusher here. Going forward, he should continue to improve. I think the offense is definitely going to rely on him more, as Zach Johnson will no longer be there, and so he just has to be a little bit more efficient, take care of the football, and if he does that, they could definitely make the playoffs in my eyes. So we'll have to see about that. But I think defense is what they're going to rely on here to help them win some games, keep them in some games so that Bruce could do his thing. And that starts with Griffin LaRue here. He was their second leading tackler with 58. He also had 10 tackles for loss. The 6'2", 210-pound defensive end, he's going to have another productive season for this defense and the team to find success. I think the frame is definitely there. Could get a little bit bigger, but he will need to continue to get better for this defense to improve for sure. And then the guy right next to him, he was the third leading tackler with 57 at linebacker, Levi Hoger. I can't remember which one it was. I apologize if I'm saying it wrong. But this is a kid that was very productive and will be a part of about half the defense coming back for Cheyenne Mountain here. Both of those guys are incoming seniors, and so I could really see those 2 turning up. So we'll just have to see about all of that there. All right, now predicting their season here. So on the interview with Bruce, we talked about the season preview I originally had. I went back and forth, so I think I only changed 1 game here, but we're just gonna go week by week here. So they play Pueblo East to start. I think that's a winnable game. They are actually losing their starting quarterback in Zayden Stevens. I think Bruce and company wins that one, but still could potentially be close. After that, they play Greeley Central. I may try to go to this one here. This will be a tough one here. I probably will go to this one here, but I think this is a winnable game for them. I know they do return a bit, so we'll see, but I think they win this one. Then they play Canyon City, Pueblo Centennial, both wins. Denver South, they are losing some guys, but they return a really good backfield and some good defensive players. I think that's a loss. Could potentially be a win if you could steal that one. Then they play Air Academy. Honestly, Air Academy is losing some pieces. I think that is a win, and that'll be a key win for them. Then they play Rampart, Vista Ridge, Palmer Ridge. I think those 3 are losses. Both of those, or all 3 of those teams are very good. And then they end the season against Coronado, which could be big here. If they could beat him here, that would put them at a predicted record of 6-4. And I'm giving them a window of wins, a pretty big window of wins of 3-7, because I really think it could go either way here for Cheyenne Mountain. I'm looking at the Pueblo East game. Pueblo East, Rampart, Central games as winnable ones, but definitely could be going either way though. I'm looking at East being a little dangerous here. Central could be dangerous, but I still have them favored. And Air Academy, they should definitely beat them, but we'll see about that. But I don't know. I'm just going back and forth about those. Those ones definitely make me a little bit nervous. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Bruce to help figure out the offense and get them going here. They're going to have to score. They can't have slow starts, plain and simple there. And so if they could go 6-4, I think they're a playoff team here. Maybe a fringe playoff team, but, beating an Air Academy, Coronado, that'll go a long way. And then you have to take care of business in your non-league games. I think that will also be key to success and to Cheyenne Mountain making the playoffs. So we'll just have to see about that. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about Rampart here. They were one of the other teams on this episode, one of the 2 out of 10, mind you, that I just got completely wrong about here. So let's talk about them. And wrong in a good way, though, for sure. So they went 4-6, and they made the playoffs, which is interesting. But they went 4-6, and I predicted them going 1-9 here. So let's talk about where I guess some of these games went wrong here, because I also had them in a window of wins of 1-3, so I wasn't too far off here. Actually, I wasn't completely wrong, my bad. They were one of the 3 teams that were within 1 game of the window of wins, so there you go. But I was still wrong, though. So let's go ahead and talk about Rampart here, some of the games that went wrong. So they blasted Palmer, right, as I predicted. And then I said they could potentially beat Air Academy, which they did, 21-14. I think I predicted Air Academy winning that one, though. That would eventually be a really key game, and probably, I would say, the one that put them in the playoffs. So there you go there. And then I said they could potentially beat Vista Ridge, but they got blew out by them, 56-14. And then they beat Coronado and Cheyenne Mountain, which were games which I thought they would definitely lose. So there you go. That was the difference there. But talking about all of last season, how it went, Coronado, they blew out, like I said, 45-0. Lost to Doherty, 48-21. Beat Palmer 49-14. Then they lost to Dakota Ridge, Heritage, and Palmer Ridge as expected. Beat Cheyenne Mountain, which was unexpected to me, 55-14, before losing to Mesa Vista by a lot. And then that Air Academy game, like I said, they won 21-14. That was key. That put them in the playoffs, where they lost to Golden in the first round. Giselle Riley in that group, 28-0. But still a pretty solid season for the first year head coach over there at Rampart. Now, let's talk about some graduating seniors, because they definitely do have a couple. Not as many as last year, mind you, but definitely some key pieces here, starting with their quarterback, Braden Sears, who has been the quarterback ever since the end of the Kale Cormani era, so the last 2 years for sure here. And he just had a very down year. They didn't throw the ball a ton, and he only threw for 446 yards on 4 touchdowns to 5 interception efficiency. He did run for, a solid 333 yards and 3 touchdowns. That was good enough for second on the team in rushing yards there. So there you go. Still, though, even though he lacked some production, he's definitely still going to be missed. I mean, you want continuity at the quarterback position, and him leaving, that obviously takes that away. So there you go. Now, they also lose their top 2 receivers here, their lead receiver being Chase Miller, who had 10 receptions, 232 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Also on defense, had 37 tackles and 2 picks. He was one of the leaders on this defense in interceptions here. So there you go. They also lose Jay Phillips here. He had 8 receptions, 199 yards, and a touchdown. So there you go. Not a lot, but still, I mean, like I said, continuity, right? They also lose their lead tackler, Ryan Koch here, or Coach, I want to say. Excuse me if I'm saying that incorrectly, but he had 76 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, and 2.5 sacks. He was the lead tackler and sack leader for this squad. Also, by the way, Chase Miller, he was 3rd on the team in tackles. So there you go. Altogether, Rampart losing 6 of their top 13 tacklers. That does include, I want to say, this is 2 of their top 5 leading tacklers. 3 of their top 6 leading tacklers, so there you go there. But not too bad. I mean, still returning I would say the majority of the group here, which is still good for this defense. I think they will be solid going into next year. Now, speaking of next year, let's talk about some key players that will contribute to that. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball, though, and let's start with Masu Ramaka, I want to say, and if I'm saying that wrong, excuse me. This is just looks like a very complicated name, but Masu here, he had a pretty good year. This running back, he will be an incoming senior, but as a junior, rushed for 1,012 yards and 9 touchdowns. Also had 103 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. Going into his senior year, should definitely be the engine to this offense. He's a tough back. He's definitely somebody that could carry an offense like Rampart. So there you go there. They also returned Camden Burns, who was their third rusher on the squad, just behind their quarterback Sears. He had 316 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns on 5.7 yards per carry, only 55 carries, so that is obviously pretty good there. I should also probably mention this other running back who will probably get a little bit more love here. That is Nate Isaacson. He's pretty low here, the 4th leading rusher, but he had 244 yards and 2 touchdowns and only 48 carries, so that is huge. Now, looking at the quarterback position, they are returning Hayden Benoit, I want to say. As a junior, he threw for only 340 yards, but had much more pass attempts than Sears, which is interesting, and just seemed to be less efficient, so hopefully he could take steps forward to be better there. So there you go. Also, by the way, Masu, he will be one of the better tacklers returning. He also had 44 tackles and 4 TFLs. So altogether, just one of their better defenders. And so for Rampart, you could really see them just relying on their defense and then controlling the pace of the game by running the ball. They have a stud at running back, and they have a couple other guys who I think could contribute to that and help, control that pace. By the way, Camden Burns, I think I said Burns, so excuse me, but Camden Burns, he is going to be an incoming junior, so he will be returning for his senior year after this one as well. But regardless, they got some guys here, and so that should mean they will be all right. But just looking at their roster, in general, they lack size. So that's concerning because they like to run the ball, so that's definitely going to be tough. And then they don't have a passing game. So that doesn't make the prospects of winning great here, but they still should be okay enough. So let's just look at their schedule and go down the line. Against Coronado, I think they should have a repeat performance and beat them. Should probably be a closer game though, but I see Rampart just doing what they do, run the ball, play defense. That's a dub. Against Doherty, they're losing. Doherty's bigger than them. I don't think that's a winnable game for Rampart though. It's only winnable if they could match their physicality and play bigger than what they are, though. So we'll see, but I think Doherty's just going to be too good here. Palmer, they should beat. And then they play a pretty tough stretch here, playing, Dakota Ridge, Heritage, and Palmer Ridge. All really good playoff teams. I think those are all losses. I don't think any of those are close. Against Cheyenne Mountain, I have them winning, but that might be a tougher one. We'll see. But I think they should still win that one for sure, though. Then they play Vista Ridge, Mesa Ridge. I don't think they're winning either of those games. And then to end the season, they play Air Academy at home. This should be another dub, especially with Air Academy losing so much. This shouldn't be as close of a game as it was last year. And so altogether, actually, just a very similar record to what they had last year. I have them finishing 4-6 like they did last year, with a window of wins of 3 to 5 there. This is not a talented enough team to fare well against the heavyweights like Heritage, Palmer Ridge, Dakota Ridge. They're not there yet. And they play a tough schedule. And so even though they play a tough schedule and they're not going to win a lot of these games, that should help them out when it comes to RPI, rankings, all that stuff, and could put them in the playoffs. And if they could get within one game of 500, I think there's a solid chance that they could make the playoffs. If they get to 500, I think they're making the playoffs for sure. But we're just going to have to see what happens. I'm looking at some of these games here. If you could steal a game against a Doherty, a 5A team, that'd be huge. Or maybe upset a Dakota Ridge, Heritage, Palmer Ridge, which I really don't think, or Vista or Mesa. I just don't think they can do that, though, because they're just really limited. They're going to run the ball. That's great. They have talented backs. Defense, they're going to rely on them. I don't know how good they could possibly be, so that could be a lot of pressure on them. That is losing almost half their defense, close to half their defense. And then the passing game, they just haven't been efficient there. And so if they could ever fix the passing game, that could go a long way for them. But for now, we'll just have to see what happens. 4-6 is where I have them being at, just like last year. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about Falcon here. Falcon went 2-8 last year, and that was one of the records that I predicted exactly right here. I mean, they had a pretty rough schedule. I'm not going to lie. They had a pretty rough schedule here. There were a couple things that went just a little bit differently here. I said they would beat Lewis Palmer, which they did, 20-14, and they beat Coronado, who I thought, could beat them, but, it was what it was. So definitely some changes there. But then they also lost to Air Academy 19-15. So actually, now that I'm looking at this, they basically just traded the Coronado and Air Academy games there. I thought they would lose to Coronado and they would beat Air Academy. It was switched. They beat Coronado, lost to Air Academy. Now let's talk about the rest of the season here. I mean, like I said, tough schedule. Lost to Fans Fort Carson 49-21. Lost to G-Dub, a very talented 3A squad, 20-0. Lost to Aurora Central 19-14. I predicted that one as a loss. But considering how Aurora Central did last year, if I knew what I knew then, I probably would have called that one a win, though. But it was what it was. And then they lost to Vista Ridge as expected. Beat Lewis Palmer in a close one, 20-14. Beat Coronado, 41-19. Then they lost to Montrose and West as expected as well. After that, they lost to Air Academy and then Mesa Ridge. So a tough season, and we knew it would be. I mean, they were losing a lot of guys here. Now, let's talk about some of their graduating seniors here. I am going to note this. It already grinds my gears. For some reason, they did not record any defensive stats, even though they have all their offensive stats. So, annoying. But one guy I know they are for sure losing is Jeremiah Sandiford. He was the best defensive tackle in our eyes. He was a top 5 seniors guy there. And he was a good lineman. He is pretty much irreplaceable. I don't know if they're going to find another guy like Jeremiah Sandiford, but he was a huge part of that defense. He's gone now. They're also going to be losing David Chumley III, played DT middle linebacker. He presented some size. He would definitely be missed. Isaac Brown was another guy who played corner. I believe he made our watch list as well. He will be missed. And so 3 defensive guys who will be gone, right? On offense, I mean, there's definitely a little bit more going their way here because they have a little bit more production. And so let's talk about that here because most of those guys are returning, starting with Carter Thorpe. Incoming senior last year, played a lot of quarterback for them, but it looks like near the end of the season, it looked like he switched primarily to running back, which makes his future interesting. But he threw for 539 yards, 3 touchdowns to 6 picks, but ran for 867 yards and 7 touchdowns. That includes big performances against Pueblo West, where he went for 139 yards and a touchdown, Air Academy 144 yards and a touchdown, and Mesa Ridge 153 yards and a touchdown. Honestly, not sure about what's going to happen there. It looked like he moved to a running back because the other guy that played running back, it got hurt. It seemed like potentially, I want to say so, but like I said, it's hard to kind of see. I think you just kind of had to be there. No matter where he plays, though, he's valuable to the team. For now, I'm going to slot him in at running back, but could potentially still play quarterback, maybe more in a Wildcat sense, though. But the other running back, Gabriel McFarland, he started. He ran for 730 yards and 8 touchdowns, but it looks like seemingly he got hurt against Pueblo West because he doesn't play again after that. His biggest games, though, were against Lewis Palmer, where he had 130 yards and a touchdown, and then Coronado, where he had 248 yards and 5 touchdowns. Just absolutely killing it, delivering Falcon their 2 wins on the season there in those 2 games. And so as an incoming junior paired with Carter Thorpe, they should be a pretty serious rushing duo. Both of these guys are on our watch list, by the way. For McFarland to do what he did in those 2 games primarily, that was huge. That adds him to the watch list. Plus his brother Darius, I want to say, was already, a great running back for Falcon back in the day, a couple of seasons ago. And so this was probably to be as expected. So there you go there. Now, looking at the quarterback position, it looks like Thomas Keene. He got the start at quarterback the last 3 games, threw for 197 yards and 2 picks. Wasn't particularly great, but he was a freshman doing that at the end of the season. So, you just kind of got to hope that he gets better. But if he could continue to develop as a passer and they'll leave the usage of Carter Thorpe at quarterback and move him to running back, which I think he's more of a running back, then this Falcon team can really start cooking here. I would be on the lookout for Tyler Cox, who was a year ahead of him and may get snaps at quarterback again this last season, which was interesting, but we will see here. And so regardless, this backfield will be really interesting for them moving forward here. They're going to carry this team, and I think they can. I mean, they have talent here. Both of these running backs in Thorpe and McFarland are talented, and they're good, right? But once again, they play a pretty tough schedule. So let's just go down the line, talk about this schedule here. They play Fountain Fort Carson at home. That's a loss. Fountain Fort Carson, they're losing some players. They got some monster offensive linemen returning, along with a great backfield and a bunch of tough players here. This Falcon defense is going to have to play at a high level to beat them. It's not just going to be on the offense. So I don't think they could do that. That's going to be tough. I do think, though, they're going to play G-Dub and beat G-Dub at Denver in their house there. They're losing some key players in Marcellus Honeycutt, Silas Evans, Gerard Vaughn, including a couple coaches. Still think it could be a close game, but I think this Falcon backfield can outplay G-Dub and win this game here. I think this would be the year to do it, if any. Then they play Aurora Central. I think they should definitely be able to beat Aurora Central here and, get another win in a row here. Following that, though, they play Vista Ridge. That's not a winnable game, even with the players they're losing. Then they play Lewis Palmer. That is a winnable game. Should be close, though, as they also like to run the ball, but they do return a couple more players, so makes me nervous, but I think Thorpe and McFarland should be more than enough to beat them. Following that, they play Coronado. I feel like Falcon is tougher up front, bigger up front, and I'd like these running backs to really just take over this game. Plus, McFarland had a monster game against them last year without Carter, it looked like. And so adding Carter, obviously, that would be a difference maker. And so I think Falcon can beat Coronado this year. Then they play Montrose and Pueblo West. They're not beating either of those teams, in my opinion. They play Air Academy. I think that is a dub. Could be a loss down the season as they continue to gel that Air Academy team, but I really think this Falcon team should be able to beat them. And then they play Mesa Ridge at the end of the season, and I think that is going to be a loss. So altogether, I give them a predicted record of 5-5 here, getting dubs against G-Dub, George Washington, Aurora Central, Lewis Palmer, Coronado, and Air Academy. That'll put them at 500. I think those are all winnable games for them. And if they get over 500, I think they make the playoffs for sure. But that would mean having to beat a Montrose, a Pueblo West, a Mesa Ridge, or a Vista Ridge, or a Fountain Fort Carson, which I just don't. I don't know. Those are just tough. They have good offenses. It's hard for me to see this offense being able to keep up while also playing good defense, which I know nothing about, but I don't know. I just don't think their defenses are going to be able to hold up super well against those squads. But we'll see. We'll see. I think at best, they win 6 games, they make the playoffs. At worst, they win 3 games, and they definitely don't make playoffs here. But this is definitely a team that could be on the cusp here, and so these last couple games at the end of the season will matter. If they get upset by Air Academy, they're not making the playoffs, plain and simple. If they upset Montrose, West, or Mesa Ridge, that definitely significantly makes their chances of making the playoffs a lot higher. So, yeah. I don't know. We'll see. Regardless, I mean, they got McFarland, they got Carter Thorpe. You got to work with those guys, play through those guys, and I think they could lead you to a 500 record. Okay, now we got Liberty here. This was a team whose record I actually got wrong. I think I misspoke earlier saying I got Rampart's record completely wrong. It wasn't completely wrong. I was still in the ballpark. But this Liberty record was one of the 2 teams, at least on this episode, that I was just off the mark about. I am going to say this. Their schedule was not complete when I saw it. I don't know if that would have changed my prediction a whole ton, but it definitely would have affected it, seeing some of the teams they played. because they honestly played a pretty easy schedule. They won 6-4, and I originally had them winning 1 or 2 games, so I am going to give myself some slack there, but still wrong, though. I did mention, though, in my prediction that the Sierra, Canyon City, and Centaurus squads are easier teams, But they lost to Canyon City 21-12, which is interesting. But they beat Sierra closely 26-20, and Centaurus 20-14 there. So there you go. There, I didn't think the rest of their schedule would be built like this, though. And so, I mean, here first, let me just talk about last year here. Talk about their schedule. They played Air Academy, lost 53-8, expected. Canyon City, that was really a winnable game in my opinion. I think that's a winnable game. Lost to them 21-12. That was away though, so it is what it is. But they bounced back with a pretty tough win against Sierra, 26-20. They got a stud over there in Michael Lumpkin, so I know what he could do. Then Gateway forfeited, and then after that they beat Hinckley 51-0, beat Palmer closely 10-6. Beat Centaurus closely 20-14. Then they got destroyed by Thomas Jefferson 41-0 on the road. Then they beat Thornton on the road 22-6 before losing to Widefield at home 48-6, missing out on the playoffs here. Still though, 6-4. That's their best record. Ooh, I think since I was there, since like 2015. Yeah, it had to have been. They haven't won this many games since then, so that's definitely huge. You got to work with that. But here's the thing to remember. The teams they beat had a combined record, so all 10 of these teams had a combined record of 13-47. All right, so the 10 teams they beat had a combined record of 13-47. Widefield having like 8 or 9 of those 13 wins. So, there you go. And then that means between the 6 teams they beat, there were 13 wins between those 6 teams, which kind of just shows how easy their schedule was. I mean, the only blowout they had, which, they won, was against Hinckley, right? But then they got hammered by playoff teams in Widefield, Air Academy, and also got blown out by Thomas Jefferson, who missed the playoffs, barely, right? So just keep that in mind. They definitely play an easier schedule. I mean, this is what is left of that I-25 league. It's not called that. It's called 4A League 8 now, but it's still an easier league for sure, though. So there you go. Just putting all that out there. But they are going to play in this league again, so that does help kind of project this season a bit better than last season here. And so let's start by talking about graduating seniors. They don't have many. In fact, they're all on the defensive side of the ball here, starting with Kyle Carroll here, the linebacker. Had 67 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, was the second tackle leader there. Then you also have Landon Vidmar, their starting safety. He had 60 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, right behind Carroll there in these rankings. He was the third leading tackler for this squad. And then you also have Nico Reyes, the other safety, who had 51 tackles, 4 tackles for loss. He was their 5th tackle leader. So there you go. But those 3 players, make up not a majority, but a pretty solid amount of tackles they had. But with all that being said, Liberty is losing 4 of their top 13 tacklers, 3 of those guys being Kyle Carroll, Nico Reyes, and Landon Vidmar. So yeah, and then I think the other guy being Kazuba, I want to say, who had 40 tackles. So they're returning the majority of their defense, right? Who has a lot of experience, by the way, and we'll talk about them more later. They're returning their offense. I don't think there were any significant guys. I mean, Kyle Carroll, he had 144 rushing yards, but wasn't really used like that. Nico Reyes had 144 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. They're returning the majority of their team, so Liberty should be pretty strong here. With that being said, let's talk about key players here. Chris Hunter, this incoming senior, as a junior, ran for 1,321 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns. which was a big jump, which was anticipated for sure. But moving forward, it will be interesting to see if he can continue to improve as he blasted bad teams, but struggled against borderline playoff teams, really except Air Academy. So there you go there. But he's a good athlete, and he's been a good athlete since close to his freshman year, I want to say here, just continuing to turn up for Liberty here. And so definitely a bright spot, engine of their team for sure. Speaking of engines, let's go ahead and go to the defensive side of the ball, where their best player on defense and their key player here is linebacker Lucas Westerman. As a sophomore, he was the lead tackler for the squad with 99 tackles and 4 tackles for loss. Also tagged on a sack and 2 interceptions. Once more, going into his junior year, only his junior year, I expect him to be the tackle leader again and lead this defense. A defense that is returning the majority of the starters here. All right, so there you go there. And then going back to the offensive side here, let's go ahead and talk about their quarterback here, Elijah Rupejko, I want to say. Rupejko? I think that's how you say it. Like I said, if I'm saying it wrong, excuse me. But Elijah here was the junior quarterback. He will be a senior quarterback going into this season here. And as a junior, threw for 1,050 yards, 8 touchdowns to 7 picks, which was fine. I think he is a solid quarterback. He just needs to play a cleaner game, clean up those turnovers for Liberty, and improve and make better decisions. And I think that could potentially take this Liberty team to the next level. So definitely returning some good continuity here going into this next season. And it also helps to be returning your top 2 receivers here in Jackson Hunt and Jackson Miller. They were their top receiving options. I think going into next year, they will definitely both be better. Hunt will be an incoming senior, and Miller will be an incoming junior. So definitely a lot of experience for Liberty. They got some solid contributors on offense coming back who have proven to been productive against the teams that they play. And then on defense, they did solid enough last year, winning some close games. The majority of those guys come back, including their leader, Lucas Westerman, right? So a lot of things to be positive about if you are Liberty here. But let's go ahead and go to their schedule here from this year and predict this record. So, starting out, they play Air Academy right away. I think that's a dub. Air Academy, the Sam Beers era, it's over. It's over. It's done with. They're not going to have a guy who's going to run for 200 or 300 yards. And if they do, that's definitely going to be on this Liberty defense, right? And so with that being said, I like the experience Liberty brings back. I like the running back, Chris Hunter, quarterback as well, plus the receivers. This defense will be experienced. Air Academy's team will not be as experienced. This should be a win. Could be close, but I think this really should be a win. Then we have Canyon City. That should definitely be a dub. It was a close one last year. I think this will not be as close this year. Then they play Sierra again here. That could be another close game, but I really trust Liberty to win this one. Sierra, they're losing some players. They still bring back Michael Lumpkin, who's probably gonna go crazy. But other than him, they're gonna need more players to play well, other than him to win this one. So there you go. Then they play Gateway, Hinckley. Both of those are dubs. I don't really see either of those games being close. They play Palmer. This is where it gets tricky. I'm going to talk about Palmer literally right after this segment, so stay tuned here. But Palmer played them close last year. And I think this year, Palmer gets their revenge here. They play Palmer away, right? Which, it's not a big deal. They're still in the city, right? But both of these teams are built similarly in similar spots. Should be a pretty good game. I would low-key actually like to go to this game. Probably wouldn't be the most popular choice to feature, but this would be a really fun game to see here. It's going to be close. I'm going to say this is a loss, but definitely could be a win. They play Centaurus next. Last year was a close game. This year, they returned most of their guys. It really should be a win. I don't see them dropping it. Centaurus loses their quarterback, I'm pretty sure. So that makes Elijah here, Rupejko, a pretty significant difference maker, bring back experience. So he should be the better quarterback. Then they play Thomas Jefferson. That's a loss. They play Thornton. That should be a win there. They're losing some serious playmakers. They will keep their quarterback, but they're also losing some size. I just think they should be able to win that game. And then they play Widefield, who is returning Paul Mitchell, plus adding a really good back in TJ Washington, who was previously at Harrison. I think that's a loss. So there you go. But my predicted record for Liberty is 7-3 with a window of wins of 6-8. This Liberty team will be on par with a lot of other squads on their schedule this year. The Palmer, Thornton, Sierra Air Academy games are maybe toss-ups. Still favor Liberty against, Thornton, Sierra Air Academy. But I could see them going the other way. In the Palmer game, that's one that I could also see going the other way, going their way. But that'll be a close one. So those are some of the closer games there that I kind of see. And honestly, we're just going to have to see what this offense looks like going into the season. If their quarterback could take a step forward, right? Obviously, if he takes a step forward, the receivers are going to do well. If the receivers and the passing game is healthy and it's going, that opens up a lot for Chris Hunter. I'm not going to lie. And then, at that point, they're really cooking, right? So it really is going to depend on how well their quarterback plays. Defensively, they're going to be experienced. They should be able to put up similar production as last year. I really think they should. I know they're losing 2 safeties, right? But they return pretty much everyone else. If they don't play as well, then I guess the players individually all regressed, right? But I really don't foresee that happening. So that's why I'm confident in the 7-3 record for Liberty. All right, moving on. Let's go ahead and talk about Palmer here. This is a squad that played Liberty a lot. Or not a lot, but they played him last year for sure here. And, this was a squad that won 2-8 in the regular season. They won one more game than I predicted. I originally had them going 1-7, but still fell within the window of wins that I had for them, which was, I think it was 0-2 here. I said they might win 2 games at most, which, hey, that's what they did. All right, so that's definitely big time. Like I said, one of the 3 teams, at least in this episode, that got within those window of wins. So let's talk about how the season went here. Tough. They lost 8 in a row. Jeez, they lost 8 in a row to start against Sand Creek, Pueblo Centennial, Rampart, Greeley Central, Centaurus, Liberty. That was a closer game though, 10-6. Lost Thornton 34-24, another closer game, only a 10-point margin there. Then lost to Widefield 41-0. But finished strong here. Beat Gateway 54-18, beat Hinckley 40-8 there, so you gotta love that. Combined with a couple close games, with Palmer, you gotta feel pretty solid about this squad here. Pretty solid, right? Definitely something to work on. They're still a pretty young team here, as that'll reflect with the seniors that they are graduating. I have 2 key seniors here. One is Jacob Calvin. He's a defensive lineman. He had 36 tackles, 6 tackles for losses here on the defensive side of the ball. The other one was actually a pretty solid, pretty significant part of this team. He was their second leading receiver in Braylon Joseph. He had 36 receptions, 606 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. Then altogether, they are losing only 3 of their top 13 tacklers, one of those being Calvin, like I said. The other one being, hopefully I'm saying this right, but Dahario Alston and Jerome Smith here. Yes, Jerome Smith. So there you go there. Other than that, Palmer is returning pretty much everyone. Like I said, a real young team, but they got some guys here. Let's go ahead and start with their quarterback. Last year, he was a sophomore. This year, he's an incoming junior. That is Thomas Picker, and he actually started as a freshman, so this was his second year as starting quarterback. And in his sophomore year, threw for 1,843 yards, 18 touchdowns to 12 interceptions here. Having a pretty good season. Also rushed for 92 yards and a touchdown. That's pretty good. It's been a really long time since Palmer has had a quarterback produce that much. And he's only a sophomore going into his junior year, so definitely a watch list guy. But with Thomas here, he had two really big games. He actually had two 400-yard games. He threw for 400 yards against Centaurus and Thornton. Unfortunately, though, he was he was a little inefficient in both of those games. Against Centaurus, 22 of 46, so that's below 50%, and then threw 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Against Thornton, a little bit better, but 19 of 44 here for 42%. 43%. Threw 3 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, and that was a 10-point loss. So, if you take away those 2 losses, those 2 interceptions, those 2 turnovers, those are potentially scores there, right? So, tough, but threw for 400 yards 2 times. I don't think there are many other quarterbacks that threw for 400 yards twice in a season. Braden Dorman might have been up there. But other than that, Thomas Pickern is the only one in the entire state of Colorado who I think did that. And so that's definitely big time. Love to see that. But you also want to see him get more consistent. Like I said, was only a sophomore, right? Now he's an underclassman. He's a junior. This is his 3rd year starting. Definitely expecting some big things from him. But on top of that, let's talk about some other guys here, like his teammate Dyson Sharpton here, also a junior, and was actually their lead rusher with 131 rushing yards and 1 touchdown. Palmer really didn't run the ball. They threw it a lot, which I absolutely love because it worked out for them relatively well. But Sharpton, he was the running back. He also played linebacker as well, I believe. He had 106 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and interception here. This was a guy that I felt like could take a step forward, as he did get some pretty solid time playing as a freshman. He was actually their 4th leading tackler, which is wild, and he became their leading tackler as a sophomore. And so going into his junior year, you could definitely expect more from him, as he has become a cornerstone of this defense. And like Pickern, these 2 young players have really helped Palmer become a little bit more relevant. So there you go there. Continuing to talk about these class of 25 players, because I think the core is really that. You have De'Aaron Mitchell here. The incoming junior was the running mate with Sharpton here. Mitchell, that is on defense, by the way. He was the running mate with him on defense. But on defense, at the defensive end position, the 6'1", 172-pound defensive end still put in work. Had 84 tackles, 22 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. He was the leader in tackles for loss, while being the second in tackles here. If he could continue to get bigger and also replicate that success from the year before, he could help build a solid defense with Dyson Sharpton. So look at those 2 guys to really headline this defense here. That is returning a lot. Like I said, only losing 3 of their top 13 tacklers. That's 10 top tacklers returning along with Mitchell and Sharpton, right? So that's huge. And then one more guy I really want to talk about. He had a breakout year. Class of 2025 will be an incoming junior, but that is Julian Horsey here. He emerged as the wideout 1 this last season, catching 33 receptions, only 33 receptions for 966 receiving yards and 12 receiving touchdowns. That's around 96 yards a game and 29 yards a reception here. He is their home run hitter. And, like I said, Palmer has resorted to more of a pass-heavy offense, thank God, by the way. And he leads a pretty solid receiving core. So it'll be here, Puentes and Dozeman coming back, and Amos coming back in this receiving core. And you can't go wrong with it. And they're only going to be juniors, so they have 1 more year still. And so there is a lot of promise and excitement for this Palmer team, which they haven't had in a really, since maybe I was in high school. So a really long time, even beyond that, I would say. This is going to be one of the more exciting young cores, full of class of 2025 guys here in the entire state of Colorado. And so Palmer got something going here for sure. But let's go ahead and start out by talking about their schedule here. To start the season, they play away, playing Sand Creek. Sand Creek is also going in the right direction. They are throwing the ball a little bit more here. I like what they're doing. I think this could be a winnable game, but for now, I'm going to go with Sand Creek. They are losing a lot, though, so if this Palmer team could go ahead and make a statement and take advantage of that inexperience, that would be huge. Like I said, though, I'm going with Sand Creek, though. Definitely a game that could go either way. Following that, they go ahead and play Pueblo Centennial. I think this is a win. They really should be able to beat this team that is losing a ton. There's really no excuses there. Then they play Rampart. That's a tough one unless the defense really steps up here, which I don't know if they're going to be like that. I just don't see them beating Rampart here, so that's going to be lost. Then they play Greeley Central here. This is one that I potentially might go to. It is in Greeley, though, so we'll see. But I think this will be a loss. Greeley Central will also be returning a lot, and they are a lot more experienced than Palmer as it is, so I'm just not gonna go there quite yet here, but I think that could be a close game. Then they play Centaurus. This should definitely be a closer game than it was last year. I want to say they lose their quarterback, could be wrong, but they return their running back, Mishki, I want to say, who is really good and played great. This defense will have to put in a little bit more work here. I think the offense could be fine and be productive, but defensively they're going to have to put in a little bit more work. But then I think things get a little bit easier here, or ease up for them. They play Liberty next. That's going to be a good game, a home game. Like I said, I'm going to try to go to this one. No promises. But I think they eventually lost from last year and win a close one. This should be a really good game. I think with a couple close losses leading up to this game, they're going to be really hungry for a win. This is the one here. Then they play Thornton. I think they beat this team. This is a team that loses its best player in Isaac Gomez and some size up front. I think they beat Thornton straight up. Then they play Widefield. Widefield's going to be real tough between Paul Mitchell and TJ Washington. That squad, I keep talking about them here. They're not going to be on this episode. They're going to be on a future episode. But Widefield's going to be tough. I don't think they beat them. They're good. But then I do believe they will beat Gateway and Hinckley, and those games will not be close. And so altogether, Palmer, I have them going 5-5, 500 with a window of wins of 3-6. Which if you told me that Palmer would be going 5-5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, I probably wouldn't believe you. But I really truly believe they'll go 5-5, potentially even go 500. That's why I have them going with a window of wins between 3 and 6 here. But I could see them losing some close games. I think they're really close with some of these other teams here. This Palmer team will be solid against the comp that they play this year. Some toss-up games, like I said, Sand Creek, Pueblo Centennial, both of those games I still have them favored, but I could still see them going either way. Same with Thornton. And then the Liberty one will be a true toss-up, but I still give it to them, though. So those are definitely some toss-up games. I mean, just looking at their schedule here, Sand Creek could be a winnable one. Sorry, I think I said I had them favored against Sand Creek. I don't. I have them favored against Centennial, Thornton, and Liberty. But Sand Creek is one that I think will be close, but they will just barely lose here. Greeley Central could be another one. I don't think they'll lose that one, or they'll win that one. But we'll just have to see. I think Greeley Central is going to be tough. They returned their quarterback. That could get to be a really interesting battle between those two quarterbacks, Genoa Trujillo and Thomas Pickering here. So we'll just have to see here. But yeah, I mean, this is a season where they play a lot of teams that are very much on their level. We're just going to have to see how much these players have improved. If they continue to get better, they definitely should win more games than they did last year. But for now, I have Palmer going a pretty positive 5-5 with a window of wins between 3 and 6 on the backs of their class of 2025 football players. Okay, now for our final team here, we got Vista Ridge. A very talented squad. Last year, I actually had them predicted going I want to say 8-2 with a window of wins between 8 and 10. 8 wins being their floor, but they finished just below here. They went 7-3 in the regular season here. And so let's go ahead and talk about that, and then we'll talk about playoffs right after that. So to start the season, they played Legend. This was a game that I thought they could win, but they didn't. They lost to them 47-43. And this was a bad game. They had like 6 or 7 turnovers in this game. I don't know when they're ever going to have 6 turnovers in a game like that again. And so that was just really fluky. I feel like that really should have been a win, honestly. And so that it was a little embarrassing, I'm not going to lie, for them to lose to Legend like that. I think that was definitely a winnable game, and it just got away from them, right? Too many mistakes. So there you go there. But they bounced back. They played Far Northeast. They beat them 43-28, so that was huge. I predicted that for sure. But then they would go ahead and play Pine Creek. I thought it would be their year to beat Pine Creek, if any, right? And I mean, they gave it their best. I think this was a much better game than the year before. They still lost 28-19 here, but it was close, right? So there you go there. But after that, you know, they went on a nice little heat streak here, winning 6 games. I had to count it up because it's kind of a lot here, but 6 games in a row. Beat Falcon, blew them out, blew out Vista Peak, blew out Northfield, blew out Air Academy, blew out Cheyenne Mountain, blew out Rampart, and then they played Palmer Ridge at the end of the season. This was a game that myself and Cody went to, and it was a thriller. I mean, at one point, Vista Ridge was up by like 7 or 10 in the second half, and it looked like they were going to beat Palmer Ridge for the first time here. And then Palmer Ridge, I mean, they just mounted the comeback, and they would win 24-17. Gator Robinson getting that game-winning touchdown, I believe, at the end. And so, just a tough go for Vista Ridge here. But, you know, still made the playoffs, right? As expected, still made the playoffs. I believe they also got a bye, so that was good. But after that, they would go ahead and play Fruita Monument. Originally, in my playoff predictions, the Palmer Ridge game really made me nervous about them playing teams like Fruita Monument. And so I thought that would be a game they would lose. But also, I didn't know about some of the injuries that Fruita Monument had, like Case and Stegelmeyer, which obviously would have changed, you know, this game. And, I mean, on top of that, they just didn't play well either. And so Vista Ridge easily blew them out at home, 56-20 there, taking care of business, where they would once again face off with Palmer Ridge, this time in Monument, so an away game here. And they just couldn't get anything going here, and they lost to them 35-21. So just a tough go, but still a pretty good season for Vista Ridge here. And they are losing a lot of great players who have started for a really long time here. I'm not going to be able to talk about everyone, so I'm just going to talk about, you know, the key players here, starting with their 4-star who's now at Arizona, Braden Dorman. He threw for 3,783 passing yards, 49 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, just smashing records here and there, doing his thing. He has rewritten the Vista Ridge record book, and so he's going to be in there for a really long time. He has started for 3 or 4 years at this point. You also have Brandon B.B. Hills, who has started for a while here. He rewrote some records as well for Vista Ridge. Plus, he has put himself in the record book in Colorado high school football history between yards and touchdowns as well. But on the season, caught 79 receptions, 1,548 receiving yards, and 20 receiving touchdowns there. Both of those guys made our top 5 seniors list. Dorman was number 1 at quarterback. BB Hills, I believe, was number 2 there, but still great. So there you go there. And also all Playmaker guys, and I believe they were in consideration for our awards, whether it was OPOY or MVP. Now, they are losing more outside of them, though. Looking at this offense, they're losing Keyshawn Dooley, who did not make our top 5 seniors list, but according to me, rated as a top 5 receiver there. And he was an all Playmaker guy on the year. He caught for 1,250 receiving yards and 18 receiving touchdowns. So 38 of the 49 between BB Hills and Keyshawn Dooley goes there. And then you have Gavin Jenkins, another senior, a big body receiver here, like 6'4", 6'5". He had 33 receptions, 619 receiving yards, and 7 receiving touchdowns. So there you go. That's 45 receiving touchdowns of the 49 that Braden Dorman threw here. So there. And then they're also losing one of their leading rusher, Solomon Arns-Volson. He had 617 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. He was actually really key near the end of the season in both of those Palmer Ridge games. He did his thing there. But shifting over to the defensive side, the losses continue on the defensive side. They lose JoJo Garnett. He was a top 5 inside linebacker for us last year, and I believe an all-playmaker guy. He had 105 tackles, 19 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions. Also played on the offensive line, so you're losing a lineman. They're also losing Micah Kennedy, another linebacker, their second leading tackler. He had 71 tackles, 11 tackles for loss. He was also third in sacks with 4 of them, so 2 of your leading tacklers there. They also lose A.J. Jordan, who also played on the offensive line but started at defensive end. He had 44 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, and then led the team with 8.5 sacks. So, a tough loss there. And then last but not least, you have Jaden Hobdy here. He started at DB for them. He had 27 tackles and led the team with 5 interceptions. Altogether, Vista Ridge losing 9 of their top 13 tacklers. So I believe they're either losing 2 or 3 of their starting offensive linemen, as well as their starting running back, their starting quarterback, and their top 3 receivers. So losing a lot here. I mean, this was a group that really built the Vista Ridge culture over there, that, you know, showed them a lot of success. And so this was a very special group here. So it's not going to be easy to replace them, but you still got some guys here who are definitely going to turn up. Let's go ahead and start with Freshman of the Year candidate, class of 2026 receiver, incoming sophomore Kobe Dooley. As a freshman, posted 26 receptions, 330 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns. He is one of the fastest, if not the fastest players in the state, and is due to be one of the top receiving targets for this receiving core that is losing so much here. Definitely expect him to put up big numbers if he could really get things going with the quarterback there, which we'll talk about quarterback here later. Then I believe he is going to be one of the best receivers in the state right off the bat and go for 1,000 yards and probably 10 plus touchdowns, right? And so there you go there. Kobe Dooley, a special talent over there. And then you also have Mason Carter, played mostly defense here, mostly at safety. I think he could also play wide receiver, but he racked up 35 tackles, 4 pass deflections. He's a stud just in general, a great athlete, and I think he's somebody that could also contribute to the wide receiving core while also still doing his thing on defense. They're going to need him for both, for sure. And then speaking of sophomores here, he will be an incoming junior just like Mason Carter. But Nashawn Hall had 383 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns right behind Arns-Volson. He will get a chance to compete for the running back 1 spot. I assume that he will be the starting running back, but keep an eye on some younger backs like Cam Tertullian, I want to say, who may get some snaps as well here. So we're just going to have to see there. Continuing to talk about guys that will contribute to Vista Ridge, and there's a lot. They are getting a transfer here. Sonny Endicott, he is a 6'1", 190-pound wide receiver from Virginia. As a junior, caught 30 receptions for 453 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's coming to Vista Ridge as he moved here, and he will be a senior. Looking at his film, he looks good. I mean, a bigger-bodied receiver who can make some plays, be a good possession guy. I think he's going to continue to add to this receiving core and add to the history of great Vista Ridge wide receivers alongside Kobe Dooley and Mason Carter. So that kind of shores up a solid receiving core. And then on the line, we'll have to see if he plays on varsity or not. They are losing 3 offensive linemen, so there is a chance that he might get an opportunity to compete. But DeMarcus Holt, this is a kid that I watched play in middle school, and I've seen him continue to work and develop. He had a pretty tough injury last year, but he will be coming back. He's a big dude. I want to say like, 6'1", 6'2", 270 pounds here. He's definitely somebody that, you know, could get plugged in here and potentially compete. Vista Ridge's offensive line should be fine, by the way. They have a lot of size here, so I'm not super concerned about them, but definitely somebody to keep an eye on moving forward. Now let's go ahead and talk about the quarterback position, because this is where things get interesting. All right, they have Ben Noblet, right? He transferred from Palmer Ridge last year and came to Vista Ridge. So he sat behind Braden Dorman. He was the backup. He got in a couple games, and Dorman basically mentored him, right? But there's another quarterback that's coming in from Pueblo East, and that is their starting quarterback, Zayden Stevens, who, if you remember, was a Freshman of the Year candidate for us way back when, and continued to improve in his second year at Pueblo East. And so both of these guys will be juniors, which does bring up a natural conflict here, as the coaching staff is going to have to decide who they are going to play here. Zayden Stevens is a little bit bigger, a little bit more athletic, but Ben Noblet, in my opinion, does have a better hold on the offense, being behind Dorman for 1 year, seeing how he did it, and being mentored by him, which I think is really important. Either way, though, quarterback is important to the success of Vista Ridge, and I think they have two quarterbacks who, I mean, you could start either one. You have to pick one for sure, but you could start either one, and you will probably still get similar results here, as I think it's that close. So we're going to have to see who they choose at the end here, but I don't think you could go wrong with either. It's just going to be interesting to see who you play, because both of these guys are talented, in my opinion. I know what both of them could do. It's just going to be a matter of who really wins this position and gets to keep it, right? So we're just going to have to see about that, but they are returning enough for me to feel pretty good about their chances going into this next year. But let's go ahead and get into their schedule here. So to start, they play Thursday, August 24th here. This is a game that I am hoping to go to, but Vista Ridge will play Legend this time away. This Legend team is very much different from the one they played last year. They're more experienced. They also didn't get to play Jaden Lawrence or maybe Ryken Banks. And so you add on those two guys, Legend's going to be tough to beat. They also bring back a really good defense as well. So I think that's going to be a loss. Then they play Far Northeast. They should beat them. But then they go ahead and play Pine Creek. Saturday game, 1 p.m., which is interesting. September 9th here. Might potentially look into going to this game. These are always intense. I have Pine Creek winning this one. So not easy. They play two of the top teams at 5A as a 4A squad. But after that, things ease up a little bit. They play Falcon, Vista Peak, Northfield, Air Academy, Cheyenne Mountain, and Rampart. Those should all be wins just like that, just rattling it off. Dub after dub after dub. I think they have a lot of talent. I think they could go in and easily win those games there. But they gotta be careful. They can't be too overconfident. But I think those are really just games that they should be able to win. At this point, a quarterback should have been picked by now. I'm going to be honest with you, if not way before this. And so that does lead up to the final game of the season, this time away in Monument against the rival Palmer Ridge here. It's going to be interesting because Palmer Ridge, they are losing their head coach. They're losing a very important lineman in Jackson St. Aubin. They're losing their corners, receivers, running backs. I mean, they're losing a pretty solid amount, but they also return a solid amount, just like Vista Ridge. And so it'll be interesting to see where both teams are. For now, I'm going to favor Palmer Ridge because they have the established and more experienced quarterback of the two schools, but this could definitely also be a win for Vista, depending on where they are in the season and depending on how well all the talent they have is clicking. So there you go there. But my predicted record for Vista Ridge is 7-3 with a window of wins between 5 and 8. It does feel a little bit more generous because I'm not going to lie. I feel like I'm putting a lot of faith in this coaching staff to just make sure some of these athletes and players are varsity ready and ready for a much bigger role. But I think that mid-season stretch after the Pine Creek game will be vital to their season. I really think that is a stretch where they go undefeated. Starting with Falcon, Vista Peak, Northfield, Air Academy, Cheyenne Mountain. They really should be going undefeated there with the talent they have. Now, if they start losing some of those games, we'll have to see, right? It could be growing pains too. So we'll just have to see what happens. If they can't win 4 out of those 6 games in that, little stretch, ideally more, then they're not making the playoffs. Just period. right? You have to win at least 4 out of those 6. And then how in rhythm they are after that, leading up to their final game, their showdown against rival Palmer Ridge. That'll probably decide whether they win that game or not. And that will probably be an important game that has big seeding implications and could mean the difference between staying at home or playing in the first round here, probably away, right? So we'll just have to see here. They're going to have to reload. It's going to be a growing year for a lot of players, but these players are talented, no doubt about that. But there you go. That's Vista Ridge. I have them going 7-3 here with a window of wins of 5-8. That will wrap up this episode of the Playmakers Corner podcast. Thank you so much for rocking with us. Tomorrow, we're going to drop the Bruce Archambault interview. We talk about the season preview here and all that stuff. I gave him the season preview months before, so this was recorded a couple months ago. So there you go there. But this should be that should be a really good episode. And continue to look out for more season previews. Plus, our watch list. Those are going to be dropping by this point, should continue to be dropping as we build up to the start of the regular season. If you want to see all that, follow us on our social medias at Playmakers Corner. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok as well, where we will be posting little trailers of season previews and stuff like that. Also check out Cody's season previews as well as Gideon's season preview there. But that'll be all for now, and we will see you next time.